Hello, friend, and welcome to the first podcast of 2025 for the Life Changing Manifestations podcast. We are talking today about how anything that can be done better. Work smarter, not harder applies here. And I have come up with a system for myself that is not adding anything to my plate, that is not doing anything more, but is going to make me more effective. And obviously, if I'm more effective, if I'm applying myself more, if I'm doing more things, then I can expect that I'm going to have better results than I had in the previous year. So that's what this is about, is how can we hone in on doing things better this year in 2025 than we've done in the past. And a good example of this is sometimes we need to go at things a little bit differently, maybe with a different perspective, a different insight, a new discovery, just to be able to change things, because change is necessary for improvement. Will you follow me with that? Change is necessary for improvement. And we know this because if nothing changes, then nothing changes. But if we want something to change, we've got to be the person who's creating the change so that the change can happen in our lives. And I saw this firsthand after our move. We'd gone from a good school, and I say good as in my kids had good support around them, good structure. They have IEPs or whatever you call them in your state, but it's just like a plan that the school has to provide them this extra support to help them to be on target with where they're at, because they started out behind in some areas. Well, they're each unique and they each have different unique IEP plans. Coming to the new school's job by law is that they have to review this IEP and find ways that they're going to implement and support the student in their school system. Okay, you're tracking with me? All I have to say, we go to have the review plan, and the school has looked it over and done their evaluation before they're talking to me on the phone, and they're going over this with me, and they're like, can we ask you some questions? And I'm like, of course. And as they're asking me these questions, what we're discovering is that the level of support that was being given previously, they're like, do you really think they need this? And they were going one by one. I mean, they're being thorough and asking me these things. And there were areas where I was like, I don't think they need that kind of support. But then they did their own testing. And particularly with one student in particular, with a new teacher and a new perspective, even though they read the file, all the notes from the past teachers, they took that into account, but they wanted to review the student independently on their own. And in doing so, told me, he says, I think he's actually quite smart. And I was like, interesting. And I don't think he needs all the support that they were giving him. I think we need to allow him to progress and see where he's going to go with this. And all that to say, he was getting reading support before, and now he's already reading on grade level. He was getting support for math, and he was solving an algebraic equation. So which is which? Was it the expectation that they had of him because they knew him before he had progressed, and now that he's progressed, somebody can see him in a new light? Was it just a change in how they were being taught? What was it? I don't know that I'm necessarily going to know, but it's something like this that is so crucial that we need to do in our own lives, is we need to be able to look at things from a different perspective. We need to almost get out of our situation and go, what else is going on here? What else could I change? What could I do better? And that's what I did for myself. And I was looking, okay, there are things that I've done over the last 5 years that have been very helpful and have gotten me from where I was being an employee, because it was 2019 when I left being an employee full-time for a company and I went out onto my own. And throughout that time, I've taken some other roles. They haven't filled up my whole, not like a 40-hour gig, but I've taken some other roles to kind of support myself, because I've been in this up, down level. And I want this year to be more up. And not that everything is always going to be on a rising trajectory. I get that. But I want there to be just more growth. Whereas before, I feel like some of the other years have been about foundations, about setting up what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do it, all the things. But in 2023, yes, going into last year, 2024, I had already created the intention of life-changing manifestations. I had already started to develop out what I'm going to be creating, what kind of content I'm going to put out there. The podcast was launched last year. And I think, okay, I've done this all year. What can I do different this year? Well, one of these things is just turning it into video as well, so that I can extend the outreach through my YouTube channel, which I already have that in place, and also be able to put it onto the podcast where people just like to listen to things. And I love listening to podcasts. Reach more people in different audiences in different ways. So it's about that smarter factor. It's about how can we improve things. And so there's a quote from Earl Nightingale that says, if we're doing anything this year the same way we were doing it last year, then we're obsolete. Obsolete. Yes, that was his take on it. And I love his frankness and his directness and how he speaks and the wisdom that Earl Nightingale is able to still pass down to us from his audio recordings. And I think about that. And I think about the reach that he had with his radio broadcast, which is kind of like what I'm setting up here with the podcast and YouTube channel, is how can we be sharing information that's relevant? How can we be sharing content that matters? And life-changing manifestation matters because it's about empowering Christian women to connect with God, live out your best life for his glory and what he has intended and made you to do here and now. Why do we exist in this time in history? I'm always asking myself that question because I'm curious and investigating. How can I be doing more? Who am I supposed to be? How can I be rising to the challenge to stand in that, to create my legacy, to do the things that are going to glorify God through my life? I don't want my life to be mediocre. I want my life to be great and grand. And so that's what we're going to manifest together. So make sure that you're subscribed. Make sure that you're following along so that you are connecting with the message of life-changing manifestations and how you can be growing and how you can be expanding. So what are you going to be able to do? What changes are you going to be able to make so that going into 2025, which is where we're at right now, we are starting it strong. We're starting it with clarity. Okay. You know, you want to manifest anything, got to know where you're going. So start clearly. I this year only did 4 goals. And that's different for me because normally I'm like making a list and I'm coming up with all the things. And there is some good practice to that is that, you know, the more things you have on your plate, goals, right? The more that you can manifest. However, I also thought about how I need more constraint. I need more focus. Do you know what you need? And so this year is about being purposeful. That's my word of the year. Some people like to cast a word of the year. I've decided for me, it's purposeful, is that I am going to be purposeful about what it is that I'm creating. I'm going to be purposeful about what I'm doing. I'm going to be purposeful about how I'm spending my time. And that is the big shift that I'm doing. So remember, going back to how can we do things better and how can we be smarter, not harder, and how can we make sure that we're doing stuff that makes sure that we're moving forward in our trajectory, not backwards, not stagnating, not becoming obsolete. And for me, that was about being purposeful. So what that looks like for me, especially because I work from home, I don't have anybody like looking over my shoulder. I don't have anything that I'm accountable to other than myself. It's like, how can I honor myself? How can I do something even better? How can I make use of this day that I've been given, which ultimately builds into my weeks, my months, my year, is I need to structure my time more and make sure that the time that I'm putting in is enough to get done the goals that I have. And it's also the best use of my energy. So let me give this an example for you. One of my goals is to release 50 pounds. And I had a weight loss goal last year and didn't hit it. So I'm like, okay, what can I do better this year? And how can I make sure that I'm not coming to the end of the year and I'm frustrated like I was this past year? How can I do something differently? And so I'm using a metabolism tracker, like I blow in it every morning and it tells me my macros. I've never done counting macros before. It tells me that. But in order to do all of this, I need to think about what it is that I'm eating and how am I moving my body. So these elements, well, what kind of energy do I need to do to be able to person who can cook for myself, to plan out these meals, to get my body into motion? I need good energy for that. And it reciprocates that all builds more energy, right? But I want to make sure that I'm planning those into my day for when I'm going to plan out my meals. When am I going to take the time? Because it takes more energy to prep and cook than does just to pull something out of the freezer, right? Or stop at carry out and get something. So when I think about these elements, I'm actually building them into my day now. And the same thing with my work. I thought, okay, how many hours minimum do I need to be able to put and set aside for the work that I'm going to do? And how can I break down my work so it becomes measurable so I can say what I did, what I did not do? And I know if I'm on target to hit my goals for what it is that I'm achieving. Because I have a big, lofty goal of how many books I want to create this year and how many resources I'm going to put out and these different things that I'm going to do to be building resources and connections with you. And so I think about what that looks like. I know I need to have good focus. That's my energy, my good attention that I can give to this and how I'm showing up for that. And I need to plan that in my day. When does it fit best into my day? When am I going to have the space to have quietness around me so I'm not getting stressed out by other people and what's going on, loud noises, distractions and disturbances? Because my brain likes to dig in deep and be focused on that thing and not go in different directions. I know these things about myself. What do you know about yourself for how you can plan it into your day so you're making the best use of your time and your energy? Because just coming to the end of the day and having a few hours at the end of the day, but you're tired and you're worn out, that's not a good plan because that's not good energy to work with. You can have the time and not have the energy. So think about these elements, how you can all put them into play, and how you can start setting yourself up to create the most amazing 2025 moving forward. Maybe you need a fresh perspective. You take it a different look. Like I was telling you about the education example. Maybe it's just shifting things around and thinking about how you're better utilizing your time, your resources, your effort, your energy. And that's, for me, I think is going to make the biggest change. And that's what I want to look back on at the end of this year and say, okay, how did I better manage my time? How was I more purposeful with my time and my energy to achieve my results? And then tracking against those 4 results that I have set up to be measurable. And from there, moving forward. And you think I'm going to do another video where I'm kind of showing you how I'm tracking some of my results and breaking down my 4 goals so that you can see it if that's something that you want to practice and do for yourself. It's a little bit different than I've ever done before. I think it's really going to make a difference, especially for people who don't like to necessarily be so structured and work with a plan all the time, but you need something to make sure you keep going in momentum. I think I'll do another video on that and talk about that. So be sure and like and subscribe, follow along so that we can stay connected and keep growing together as we create life-changing manifestations and make an impact in what you can do for God's glory. Have yourself a fabulous day, and I will talk to you next week.